I dumped a load of manure from a helicopter and wrecked their so-called dream wedding. Before you form an opinion, let me walk you through how it started. I'm a farmer raised on soil, sweat, and the turning of seasons. This land has belonged to my family since long before those cookie-cutter subdivisions and power-hungry HOA committees popped up like weeds. Unfortunately, my property borders theirs closely enough that their nonsense regularly spills over onto my side. Stick around and follow along for plenty more HOA drama like this one. The whole thing started on a Monday. I'd just gotten back from the feed store, truck bed packed with supplies, when I noticed her, Karen, the self-appointed ruler of the HOA. She was planted at my gate, arms folded like she owned the ground beneath her. I eased to a stop, cranked down the window, and asked what she needed. Without hesitation, she announced they wanted to use my farm for her daughter's wedding. Community togetherness, she called it, gesturing like the phrase alone should win me over. Funny thing, I don't even belong to their HOA. She had a razor tongue, an inflated sense of entitlement, and enough rudeness for 3 people. I told her I'd consider it, mainly to avoid watching her throw a fit in my driveway. That seemed to satisfy her, and she marched off with her chin in the air. That night, I brooded while sharpening tools out in the barn. My instincts were screaming one thing: nothing good ever comes from tangling with an HOA. They chew through your peace of mind quicker than locusts strip a cornfield bare. I made up my mind to say no. The following day, Karen turned up near my driveway again. I told her I wasn't on board. Her mouth twisted, her voice cracked like a whip. What do you mean? We've already got it all planned. The wedding is happening here, whether you agree or not. I swear that arrogance in her voice made my hands ball into fists. Right then, I understood this wouldn't stay a simple refusal. It was about to become a full-blown battle. Before going further, tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from. They must have pegged me as just another farmer, some soft touch who'd smile, nod along, and hand his land over whenever the HOA snapped its fingers. Karen made it plain the board had already made up their minds, as though her little circle of busybodies and self-styled tyrants held any real power over my property. Her tone reeked of superiority. There's nothing you can do to stop this. We're using your field. I held my expression steady, but inside I was cracking up. These people had no idea who they'd picked a fight with. I wasn't going to fold like the rest of the neighborhood, who flinched at the sight of Karen's clipboard and empty threats. If she wanted a dirty fight, I had plenty of dirt to offer. Literally. Over the following week, I gave fair warning. I put up bold red signs: private property, trespassers will regret it. I installed cameras along the fence line. I even faced her down again in person, warning her plainly that she was headed for trouble. But Karen simply wasn't built to listen. She smirked, cocked her head, and delivered a line I still can't shake. You farmers never get progress. Progress. That's what she called stealing my farm for her vanity wedding. That was the exact moment I gave up trying to reason with her and started plotting instead. I already had my fertilizing schedule set, a helicopter crew on call, tanks loaded with fresh manure, ready to blanket the fields. All I needed was to shift the date a little, lining it up perfectly with Karen's fantasy takeover. I imagined her guests rolling in dressed to the nines, the tent sparkling, tables dressed in crystal and blooms, and then the sky splitting open with a surprise they'd never forget. A bitter winter raining down on every self-satisfied grin. It was almost fitting. They believed they were marching toward triumph, but really they were walking straight into the storm I'd built for them. Right then, I quit asking myself what if and started zeroing in on when. My farm, my rules, my sky. If they wanted to play wedding crashers, I was about to crash it in a way none of them would ever forget. I made myself scarce on purpose. My absence was the trap, a quiet invitation for Karen to waltz in and claim my land as if it were a prize. And right on cue, they showed up. The wedding procession rolled in like royalty, cars gleaming, horns honking, smug faces peering out through tinted windows. Karen strutted across my soil in heels as though she'd laid the ground herself. She barked commands at the decorators while guests sipped champagne, laughing beneath white tents they had no business raising. From where I watched, I took it all in. Rows of chairs lined up perfectly, a towering arch of roses, a cake so tall it practically needed scaffolding. The air was thick with violin music and hollow flattery. Karen smirked over a glass of wine, waving to her guests like she ruled farmland that was never hers to begin with. My cameras captured every moment. Then came the thunder of rotor blades. Heads turned skyward as the helicopter swept into view, a dark shape cutting across the sun. At first, they applauded, assuming it was some elaborate wedding surprise. Phones shot up to film, cheers rippling through the crowd under the tents. They had no clue what was coming. The first pass was gentle, just a light mist across the far rows. A handful of guests wrinkled their noses, confused. Karen brushed it aside with a laugh, chalking it up to normal farm odor. But then, with a single wave to the pilot, the tank let loose. Heavy streams of manure came pouring down, splattering across dresses, coating tuxedo jackets, soaking satin and silk in a wave of filth. Screams broke out. The musicians dropped their instruments and ran. The bride let out a shriek, clutching what used to be a radiant gown, now drenched in brown sludge. The groom swore, stumbling face first into the mess. Karen's voice cracked into a shrill wail as she flailed around, drenched from head to toe, pearls and hair matted with stench. Tables buckled, champagne turned to sludge, the cake tipped over in a brown wave, guests stomped around, heels breaking, children crying, people sliding around like they were in a slapstick routine. From up in the cockpit, I couldn't stop grinning as the chaos spread below like a grassed fire. Karen thought she'd seized control. But that sky belonged to me. That land belonged to me, and that day I made sure everyone remembered exactly whose farm it was. By the time the helicopter landed a mile off my property, I was already smiling. I brushed the manure mist off my jacket and headed back toward the wreckage. When I reached the gate, the wedding everyone had hyped up had turned into something resembling a disaster zone. Guests were rushing to their cars, soaked in ruined designer outfits, makeup smeared, suits destroyed. The bride sat crying in a folding chair, her dress ruined, her bouquet tossed aside in a puddle. And standing right in the thick of it was Karen, trembling with rage and reeking like a dump in the summer heat. The second she spotted me, she charged. "You destroyed everything. My daughter's future, our family's name. Do you have any idea who I am?" Her arms swung wildly, flinging droplets of manure with every motion. "I'll ruin you in court, farm boy. This means war." Her scream carried out over the wrecked field. I let her burn through her anger. Once she'd run dry, I answered evenly. "Karen, you trespassed on my property after I already told you no. My field treatment was already on the calendar. You just happened to be standing on the wrong patch of dirt at the wrong time." The guests still hanging around stared in silence, a few even laughing, despite their own ruined outfits. Just as she promised, Karen filed a lawsuit the next day. But the courtroom was as much my territory as the farm itself. My attorney showed up loaded with proof. Helicopter service contracts and dated schedules proving the manure drop had been arranged weeks in advance. Beyond that, my security footage showed, in perfect clarity, Karen and her committee walking past the warning signs, laughing as they set up the tents. The judge barely let her finish speaking before bringing down the gavel. Case thrown out. Not just thrown out, Karen was fined for trespassing, ordered to cover the cleanup costs, and lectured for her attitude. The courtroom couldn't help but laugh as she sat there, humiliated even without the manure. After that, word traveled fast. Clips of the ruined wedding spread everywhere, and Karen's reign of intimidation crumbled practically overnight. She never came near my gate again, never dared to test me a second time. My farm stayed mine, and her ego stayed buried right where it belonged, deep in the mud. The end.